Greetings, acolytes of the galaxy and of the Force, and welcome back to today's holocron. We've been expecting you. Today we are discussing something incredibly special, as our researchers have come across something rather astounding. We all know that the galaxy holds many strange things within its borders, but that outside the confines of the galaxy come many shocking and questionable things. Things such as the Yuzhong Vong or the Null Null. Well, today we are venturing not only outside of the very galaxy itself, but to an entirely different universe as a whole, to a place that was in a parallel dimension from the one that we know from the Star Wars lore, a place simply known as Other Space. This place is home to a strange set of creatures, and an energy that Luke Skywalker coined as the Anti-Force. There's not much more to say here without spoiling it all, so let's go ahead and dive right in. Before we do though, we love reporting on obscure Star Wars topics just like this one every single day, so if you haven't subscribed yet and joined our order, reach out with the Force and crush that subscribe button. Now acolytes, let us begin. To even begin talking about Other Space, we first need to discuss the first interaction with it through a being simply known as Waru. Waru was a trans-dimensional being hailed from a universe parallel to the galaxy's own, who surfaced sometime after the destruction of the Empire and the establishment of the New Republic. In many cultures, Waru was considered a healer because of his ability to treat injuries utilizing his own body, physically. Waru was a predominantly an amorphous blob, and consisted of several golden plates acting as shields around a layer of raw, permeable tissue. A thick syrup liquid flowed freely within Waru through the spaces between the covering plates. As a side note, this isn't the only amorphous creature of exceptional power that we have seen hailing from beyond the galaxy's reaches and the unknown regions. In previous videos, we have talked about beings like the Null Null and Whitesand the Force Demon, both of which were some sort of blob-like creatures comprised of either fluid, mass, or energy. Anyway, Waru came into contact with Skywalker and Solo families due to some hijinks involving their children. You see, Waru was taken from his home dimension due to a dark side ritual gone wrong, and required a pathway home. The only way he could get home was through the sacrifice of a powerful being. Waru needed to absorb them in order to gain their power so that he could go back to where he came from in his home dimension. The Skywalker family was lured there, and that is how Luke Skywalker discovered this being and found out where it came from. Waru was able to heal creatures using his body, and had powers that astounded Luke and that existed outside of the realms of the Force. Luke was unable to sense Waru through the Force at all, actually. Waru came from a pocket dimension that exists far beyond the reaches of space or hyperspace, and is simply known as Other Space. While it appeared to be a vast expanse of storm gray nothingness, it did contain colored, swirling nebula, and stars that were described as shining holes of darkness. There were planets in Other Space, in fact, one of which was home to a species known as the Cheron, which were arachnid humanoids. The planet housing the Cheron species was under the threat of a nearby black hole. Interestingly enough, it seemed that Other Space was almost entirely comprised of black holes. The thing about this place was that it was almost a direct inverse of what real space was like. This black hole put immense stress on the Cheron species, which gave rise to a death-worshipping cult within them. The cult of the Cherons began to believe that all life that existed was an abomination, including their very own. The members of this cult believed that it was their sacred duty to speed all life towards the void of death, after eradicating all of those who were unbelievers, which meant destroying all sentient life on their homeworld. The Cheron developed interstellar travel and continued their holy mission. Eventually, all that remained in Other Space was a multitude of barren, lifeless worlds, and a few biologically engineered Cheron starships roaming the void in search of any remaining traces of life. Needless to say, the galaxies beyond the galaxy that we know from Star Wars lore were exceptionally strange and deadly, with the Cheron people potentially being a greater threat than even the Yuzhong Vong, the Sith, or any other dark side force, worshipping death itself and believing that all should eventually join together with it. But of course, I assume you are here to learn about the mystical energy that is the Anti-Force, which was teased at the beginning of our holocron. Yes, indeed, just like everything else in this strange inverted dimension, they had their very own version of the Force, though it was the polar opposite of the Force that we know. In Star Wars lore, and in a galaxy far, far away, the Force gives life and flows through and between all living things, as we have been described to us many times by various Jedi and other Force wielders. However, the Anti-Force, as Luke Skywalker called it, was the destruction of all life. In order to feed its healing powers, and to keep itself alive and to actually transport back to its home in Other Space, Waru required the feeding and destruction of other sentient life within it. Luke described it by saying it could only gain energy by annihilating the force of our universe with the anti-force of its own. Our sources today come from the Legends novel The Crystal Star, the official Star Wars RPG, and the Imperial Warlords, The Spoilers of the Empire, which was an article post on StarWars.com. I find the existence of other space and the anti-force incredibly fascinating. The idea that something from a parallel dimension, with their own rules and their own version of the force that is equally as powerful, is almost terrifying to conceive. The anti-force seems to work on a give and take system, where it requires death in order to give life and power. A prophet of the dark side named Chronal managed to access the anti-force somehow in order to actually return from the dead, using it in the home Star Wars universe. This sort of feat of power is alarming to be sure, as it could easily be turned to evil. I'm sure that before this, no other Sith has ever tried to access anti-force, because partially, they might have not even heard of it or been aware of its existence and powers, but also because if they took the anti-force into their being, they would not be able to touch the dark side of the force at all, or the force in general for that matter. The Cheron death cult reminds me starkly of the Sorcerers of Rand, who believed almost the same thing, and worshipped an energy that they simply called the Dark. The Sorcerers of Rand actually hate the Force and consider it blasphemy, as they only worship this destructive energy and desire destruction of all living things, the exact same as the species from Other Space. At first, I was very curious as to what the Dark could possibly be, as that would imply there were other energies other than the Force present in the lore. Well now, this opens up an entirely new possibility that the Dark is possibly the anti-Force, and the Sorcerers of Rand could have somehow tapped into Other Space and experienced the lifelessness of it, and decided to make a death cult of their own, inspired in their own right. The anti-force seeping into the very universe that we know. The possibilities are endless. How absolutely insane is it that Star Wars as a galaxy and as a universe is only one small section of the entire lore, and that we haven't even ventured beyond the galaxy that we know, with other forces in play beyond the Force itself? Could there perhaps be other Star Wars energies that we could explore later down the line in Star Wars lore? Energies beyond the light and the dark? Could something like the dark itself actually exist? And did the Sorcerers of Rand actually discover it first in the Star Wars lore? Were the Sorcerers of Rand actually able to peer through the galaxy of their own into a brand new one that on the surface appeared to be good, as Waru only desired to heal? However, later as Luke Skywalker learned and noted, everything must come at a price, and with that, Waru needed just as much death and destruction in order to achieve his healing properties, and needed the death of a Skywalker or a Solo to return home. A home which he desired, and yet there was nothing but a bloodthirsty species, a species hell-bent on destroying all life in their home galaxy, and one that apparently succeeded. Keep in mind, my friends, something very unique about the Cheron as a species. They are extremely intelligent and extremely powerful, and beyond this, just like the Yuzhong Vong, the Force would have an extremely hard time affecting them, meaning that there is an even greater threat out there than the Vong. And if the Cheron, with their massive amounts of influence, power, and already destroying the galaxy of their own, ever found the prime Star Wars universe, perhaps not even the combined might of the Jedi and the Sith and all of the Force would be enough to stop them. Or perhaps they would all band together and destroy them in the end. But anyway, acolytes and students of the Force, what are your thoughts on the Other Space and the Anti-Force, a version of the Force much different from the one that we know, love, and appreciate? Do you think that in the live action shows or in canon we will ever explore something like this and go to a different galaxy? We know that the Ahsoka Tano show is set to discover portions of the galaxy that we've never seen before, but I believe that it is still taking place in the Star Wars galaxy, as again the Other Space takes place in another galaxy entirely. But anyway, my friends and acolytes, thank you so much for watching and returning to the archive. We hope that you enjoyed this deep dive on Other Space and the rare species that lie within it. Be wary always, and may the Force be with you.